Now, someone told me recently that they actually put off using n8n because of one of my videos. They watched me fumble about and thought, I'm just going to wait. So I'm here today to correct that. I've been learning in the background and I wanted to bring you up to date with what I've learnt and how to get started really with your first workflow. I started to look at all of the zaps that I had in Zapier. So the first one that I built was this one, the send message when jobs are added to my particular job queue. So this is a ServiceM8 and email combination that means that when you add a job to a job queue, it'll fire off an email automatically. First thing you're going to do is hit create workflow. Now we're in n8n and we're going to give it a name. So click on this name box and we'll call it something descriptive. The next thing that I've learned is sticky notes are incredibly helpful. So if you click this sticky notes button, you can create a guide for yourself. So you double click it and you basically write down what this workflow is going to do. So sticky notes are incredibly useful. You can use them for this kind of information, or you can use them to map out sections and show how different nodes are grouped together. The next thing we're going to do is sort out the trigger. So the trigger for this, we need our trigger node, is ServiceM8, because we're looking for a trigger in ServiceM8. And we've got a choice of 25. We want this one, on job, added to queue. So hopefully you already have your credentials set up. If you don't, let me know in the comments. I can do you a separate video, but I've got a ServiceM8 demo account and my main account. So if I work with the demo account for now, and you can see the event, job added to queue. So that's already pre-selected for you and it's as simple as that. Now this is all auto-saving, so when I'm done, I can hit the cross. And so that's saved to a certain extent in the background there. Just to be safe, I'm going to hit the save button regularly. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is check which queue it is, because we're adding a job to a queue. We don't know which one it is at this point. So we need to check that it's the one that we want. So the next thing I'm going to do is hit the plus, which will bring up the nodes panel. So the next node that we need is an if node. So we click on that one and we set the following conditions. I'm going to use a little bit of JSON. I'm going to check for my queue name. So I've decided that when a job is added to a parts on order queue, it sends the customer a notification to say their parts are on order. So all I have to do is make sure that I type in my queue name exactly as it is in ServiceM8. So parts on order. While I'm going through, I'm going to update the names of my nodes because I want to make sure that everything is named properly because it makes it easier to check after. So if you right click and hit rename, you can say is parts on order queue, because you know that the answer to that true is where you want the action to happen. And we're going to rename this one. So again, you right click, rename. Again, just to help you with troubleshooting, and if you go away and come back to this in the future, it just helps. Okay, so we've got two branches now, and we only want to take an action on the true. So if it's in the if the job has been added to the parts on order queue, we want something to happen. If it hasn't, if the answer is false, we don't want anything to happen. So we're literally going to add another node onto the true branch. And for this one, for me, it's Outlook because I use Office 365, but you might use Gmail or something different. So you'll need to pick the email provider that you work with. Okay, so I want an action and it's a message action and it's send a message. So I want to send a message here. So the next thing I'm going to do is double check this. So again, I've set up my Outlook credentials already. Message, send, and I want some more JSON, who knows. And in this box, instead of fixed, I want expression. And again, I've got a little bit of code. Now, ServiceM8 puts all of the contacts, the billing contact and the job contact, into what's called an array. And they're not necessarily in the same order every time. So just because it's found the first email address in an array, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the job contact. So all this little bit of code is doing is double checking that the contact is the job contact. We want to get the job contact's email address so that we can send them an email. Then the next thing we're going to do is set the subject line. Your parts are on order, and we can create a message. So we probably want to say something along the lines of, hi, parts and they're on their way. We'll let you know when they arrive. Now, let's just sign it off. Kind regards, Hazel. This could be your company name or another member of staff. Okay, so this is a super basic message. I can expand this box. Now, there's a number of things that you can do with this message. You could send this as an HTML email message, which would mean that you can set the font and the style and the colours. You can include a fancier email signature. You could also add the first name of the person that you're sending it to by using a bit more code. So if I wanted to pull out of ServiceM8 the name of the person that we're sending it to, I'd grab another little bit of code and I'd change this to expression, and then I'd pop the code in here. So it gives you a kind of result preview, and it's telling me I need to execute the previous nodes for preview. So you could do that, or just leave it as fixed to keep it simple. And I found, as I've been working on these apps, the best way to approach this is just the bare bones of a workflow. Build the skeleton first, build the concept of all of the different nodes, and then send a message. And then you can get fancy later. If you get fancy to begin with, if you try and include the first name or HTML code or a fancy email signature, then you just have more to debug if some part of it doesn't work. So start simple and iterate. So let's call it a day at that. The next thing we probably want to do to double check that it's working is add field and add BCC recipients, and then put in an email address for yourself. So I could put in my work email address, you could put in your work email address, so that when this message is fired, it comes to you as well as the customer, so that you can just double check that it's working. And then when you're happy that it's working, you could remove that. That should be BCC. So I'm going to hit save again because I'm paranoid. And the final thing we want to do, this in itself will work. We're triggering, looking out in ServiceM8 for a job added to a job queue. We're checking whether it's the parts on order queue because that's the only one we care about. False goes to nothing, so nothing happens there. And if it's true, we send a message. But one final nice thing that we can make happen with this is adding a job note. So if we search for ServiceM8 again, it's good to keep everyone up to date. So where you've got stuff happening in n8n, try and make sure that you reflect that back in ServiceM8 so that you still have visibility of what's happened with that job. So get into the habit of adding job notes if you're taking action on a job that's outside of ServiceM8. So if we use the job actions add job note, and then we want to again match the right credentials. So I was using the demo account. We're using resource of job, add note to job, and we literally just want to send a note, and we can again keep it simple. Just say email sent to customer to confirm that their parts have been ordered. Now, again, you could put something like this was done in n8n, something to give anyone else looking at the job a clue as to how this has happened. What you will find is this job note will be added, and the name of the person or the thing that added it will be the name that you gave your API key when you first set up your credentials. So when you're in ServiceM8 setting up your API key to connect to this, make sure you call it something like n8n so that you can easily identify that n8n was the one that made the change. And so you also then need to add the job UUID. So again, I've got another little bit of code for that. So I'll click to expression. And now that's because you've got to be careful. I've taken this from another workflow, my actual workflow, and I've changed the name in the node so it doesn't recognize it. So if I change this back, let's right click the node, rename, let's change it back to job ServiceM8 trigger, and then go back into add job note. There we go. Then it's not complaining anymore. So it's grey because it doesn't have any previous data to assess whether it's working or not. If there's an error, it's going to be red. And once I execute it, it's going to be green. So there is your working workflow. Now, again, sticky notes can be useful, as I mentioned at the top, to highlight different groups of nodes. So you can use them to say, for example, this is the ServiceM8 documentation section, for example. So you can get rid of the content, click outside. You can also then change the color. So this can be useful, again, to highlight different sections of your workflow. So there is our workflow. I'm going to save again. So the next thing we're going to do is test this out and see whether it works. So we're going to hit execute workflow, and then it tells you that it's waiting for you to take the event in ServiceM8. So we're going to drop that into the queue, get rid of this. There we go. And it just runs through. So if it has any problems, it'll let you know, but it'll also let you know if it's done it correctly. So let's have a look at the workflow in more detail. So if I double click on this node again, it tells you what the output is. So it pulled through the job. You can see there. Then we can click across to is parts on order. So it's telling you that it's gone into the true branch. Interestingly, I'm looking for the queue name. There it is. Okay. Then we can move across to the message. So it goes green to indicate that you've got this code right, and it shows you what information it pulled. And then if we click through to the final bit, there we go. So you can see my note's been added, and it's been added by the name that I gave the API key. So again, just to clarify that, if I go to account and settings and API keys, so you can see this was the name that I gave it. And so that's what gets pulled through to your job notes. So my understanding of n8n has come on a long way, and I've built some really interesting workflows so far. I would encourage you to have a go at this and let me know how you get on, where you get stuck. What you can do with n8n is just incredible, and I'm really excited to kind of keep taking you through the process.